I'm really happy to see so many of you here, first of all, and I think the theme of today's conference is really exactly what we are interested in here at the school. We've been, of course, doing studies on this for a long time on corporate governance and the role of boards and directors. We have a research center at the school focused on these issues now. The school has been around now for a little bit more than 100 years, and it's exactly basically amidst of what we're interested in both studying and also doing education on, of course.
On behalf of the Danish Board Network, the Directors Institute of Finland, and the Swedish Academy of Board Directors, and ECODA, I wish to wish you a heartily welcome to this conference.
And we also want you to participate, to interact, give your comments, questions, remarks, and also answer some of the questions posted from the stage. And for that you need the app. Göran, this is sort of a launch, if I may say so, for an ongoing study. Could you please tell us a little bit more about the study?
ECODA has asked Konferens to help out with this study with a purpose to create an informative reference on how boards recruit across various European jurisdictions. And we will primarily focus on 11 countries, including Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland. We have divided into 3 different sections. The first section is about what happens today. The second is what is current best practice. And the third is some practical advice and tips for board recruitment. In the first section, we will try to capture the current processes for recruitment and succession among European boards, and also try to investigate if European boards are under pressure to establish clear succession strategies. In the second section, we will identify the best practices using the same methodology as in the first one, but also look for correlations between sound board nominations and the efficiency of boards. And in the final one, we will of course then summarize our findings and try to come up with practical advice and tips. What is the best way to recruit people, how to take the long view, what are the do's and the don'ts when you recruit persons, and of course some kind of checklist that can be usable for others. As Bella said, we have just started this, and we in the Nordics are the first out to kick off the interviewing process. And I think you all can expect a final report published on the website of Konferens, ECODA, and Styrelseakademien sometime during the second quarter next year.
I'm in the opinion that in the Nordic model is working very well. We have a principle that we have owners. They elect a competent board, and the competent board takes care of election the management, who takes care of the company's success story. That's the principle, and I think that is a very simple way to say it, but it is very important principle that also works. Corporate governance has really developed during the last 10-15 years enormously. I was first time a CEO of a listed company, 1985, and then I became a second time a CEO listed company in 2004. And those 2 words are totally different, in particular what comes to the corporate governance, totally different. We have a much better corporate governance surrounding at the moment. We have nowadays very few executive directors in our boards. Boards and executive management have different roles. We respect that. We have a transparency in the remuneration and appointment of the boards. We have independent audit committees, independent remuneration committees. We have rotation with the board members. For example, in Finland, the government says that the maximum period is 7 years, and also our code said that if a person has been 10 years in his position, there is a reason to explain. Also, this diversity has increased enormously. I also share the Göran Westberg's view that it has an important role to be a good board, to have a diversity. Nor a good board needs to have a strategic business leadership, understanding what it takes to change a company, how to face a disruptive environment as a winner. advanced technology or something similar. I also believe that the megatrends, we all know urbanization, globalization, sustainability, Internet of Things, you name a few, they may create a sound reason to develop a strategy, but just giving a generic aim on those kind is definitely not enough to be a winning strategy.
I think when we look at the role of the board, we come back to many of the things that Jorma just went through. Strategy and increasing sustainability are two of the key drivers of competitive advantage. When we look at value creation or growth on this slide, but it would be exactly the same picture, it is quite interesting to show that if you look at the average growth across industries, each of these are different industries, I just took the names off to make it less complex, but also the range of growth, or TSR, could have been exactly the same slide for shareholder returns. We should just consider that it's 5 times more variability in an industry than it is across. And I think just like Jorma said, it matters less which industry we're in. It matters more how well we are competing and doing in that industry, which comes down to, do we have a strategy that works, and do we have a management team driven by a board that will win? And we found out that very few boards actually have a very clear view of their company's competitive positioning on more forward-looking metrics. Growth is important, we all know that. We can also statistically, technically prove it on the left-hand side. If you look at the total shareholder return over a longer period of time, obviously growth is the main contributor of that. What's important, though, is to get the right growth and highly profitable growth. And on the right-hand side, we see that not all companies, which are plotted on that one, and if you look at the annual growth rate versus the value creation in terms of total shareholder return, we see many companies, good examples of profitable growth. We see a lot of non-growth companies, but we also see quite a few companies growing without creating value. So we looked at those, or rather we looked at the ones creating value in a large study, trying to understand what are some of the patterns. And I'll simplify it hugely by saying that a couple of key observations. One is obvious. The type of profitable growth is very much driven by what type of industry you're in. If you're in an industry which is stable and you have very strong competitive advantages, you should probably, and this is empirically the case, put 80% of your attention and investments into defining, expanding, and protecting that core business rules. We'll start on the left-hand side and look at the volatility, and this is the wrong graph. It's way too difficult to explain. So what I wanted to have here was the same data, but looking at the share of companies that lost their top 3 position in the last year. And that share of companies have gone up from about 3 to 4% in the 1960s to over 15% in 2012-13. That's a huge change of volatility of losing your top 3 position in 1 year. If you look on the right-hand side, rules are changing. I think Jorma mentioned the scale effect. If we go back to the 60s, with 80% probability, if you were the biggest player in the industry, highest market share, you would also have the highest profitability. That is hardly the case today. As we see on the right-hand side, in 2009, that was less than 30% the case, which is obviously the result of a very changing world. Globalization, digitalization, new business models, etc., has completely changed that fundamental strategic lever of scale.
To Jorma, I think I agree completely with you. With the right CEO, the board can relax. So the challenge for the board is always to make sure that they have the right CEO. And it's very funny to see when the board gets too involved in the company, then they should have changed the CEO before. But because that's a classical mistake, when the chairman becomes too involved, when they set up extra committees, extra meetings, extra project teams with board members, that always leads to a change of the CEO. Normally, of course, much too late, but that is what happens. So I think the role of the board is to make sure that the right CEO is in place and then empower the CEO. I've been doing this now for 30 years in different contexts, and I fail to remember that we have changed too early. But I can give you many examples of where we changed too late. I think that my experience is that, as you said, you can make money in most industries if you're a good operator, but it's much easier and more fun to make money and operate in industries with an underlying growth. If you're stuck with a company in an industry that is not growing, of course, it can be worked out, but it's a much harder work. And in the end, what will matter here is having the right people. I call it band-aid structures. Instead of taking the real decisions to change, but you band-aid structures. You know how it works. You know who is in charge, but does everybody else know that? No. So it's very important that you set things up so it's clear who has the different authority. Because everything should be fit in a spreadsheet. Then we should have a payback in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And if you're supposed to really make groundbreaking changes, groundbreaking innovation, that doesn't lend itself to be modeled in the spreadsheet. So clearly an area of concern if you're supposed to continue to be competitive up here in terms of what happens here in comparison to the rest of the world. Innovation, change, challenge, development needs to be, I think, elevated a lot.
I remember when we talked about this, I used 3 words, and I would try to stick to these 3 words to make my case, so to say. And that was insight, internalizing, and courage. It's all basically about core values. It's about core values leading to commercial values. And then third question was, does sustainability affect the business model? And the answer became, well, maybe, or maybe not. And the final question that really killed it all is the corporation's budget affected? And only 51% said no. They didn't see the connection between budget and sustainability. That sustainability is an investment into changing core values in the company that will lead to commercial values long term. I think it's time to realize that it's no longer a matter of if. It's no longer a matter of when. It's a matter of how to do it. Every single managing director in the entire SKF group knows that there's one question he will always ask when he's out visiting the companies, and that is how the sustainability work is being done. Sustainability is also an insurance against global risk. Because once you start realizing that whenever I leave my own country, I'm the guest of someone else's country, and there is a different culture in that country. There are different rules. I'm not saying what Connie sort of hinted at, that we should apply different standards to our own strategies, but we need to do the risk analysis from a point of view that risk is sometimes very, very different from what we see.
Board professionalism and company profitability, that's crucial for global competitiveness.
And I have been asked to specifically talk about some of my experiences of CSR, internationalization, diversity, and business intelligence, and all this in 10 minutes. So CSR, or sustainability, or I like the concept of shared value, which is slightly wider and has been defined by Professor Michael Porter. Shared value is about how companies can embed strategies in their business model that increase growth and profit, and at the same time have a positive impact on society. In other words, social value and economic value at the same time. I find it quite encouraging that one of the leading professors at Harvard Business School, which can be considered the West Point of capitalism, is actually raising these issues, and it gives hope for a sustainable world. 4 years ago, when the current board was formed, AcadeMedia had a sales of slightly above 2 billion kronor, and to date we have quadrupled the sales to over 8 billion. We have just recently started to internationalize the business. From day one, the board defined the focus on quality with a simple logic that if we have the best quality, we will attract more students than anyone else. If we attract more students than anyone else, it will be easy for us to run the schools. If it's easy to run the schools, it will also be profitable, and we will create shareholder value.
I do believe it's impossible to prove if a company had done other ways with another board of directors over these years, because you had to compare it somewhere, and you can't do that.
But your impression today, is it that the quota law forced the companies to do this up to 40%, or is it by willingness now? You said something in the beginning that now is it?
Yeah, they have to. I mean, it's a law. So if a company doesn't comply with the law at exchange, I'm forced to take it out.
For those that do not have insights into the company, external reporting is very important, of course. And you can divide this into different kinds of reports, and that is what I'm going to comment upon. Financial reporting, as we are used to. This is very much about financial reporting, and the future then, which is often referred to as integrated reporting.
But I think one of the secrets behind the success of the private equity model is alignment of interest and the clear division of responsibilities between the ownership role, the role of the board, and the role of the management, and to have ownership in the way that it's structured there doesn't mess up the roles.
The new shareholders' rights directive will contain a rule on the approval of major related party transactions. We think that this is an extremely important minority protection rule, and we believe again that minority protection, this has also been mentioned already today, is an extremely important element of good corporate governance. So we will promote minority protection in this new directive.
I will not go into detail, but these are the basic reasons why we ask you, legislators, to be careful of our Nordic corporate governance model.
So maybe we should ask them up on stage. I would like to have the response from representatives from the EU Council, the EU Parliament, and the EU Commission. Please welcome Cecilia Wikström, EU parliamentarian and member of the Jury Committee, Sirpa Pietikäinen, EU parliamentarian and vice chair of the IMCO committee, also member of the Econ committee, Johan Danelius, head of division for real estate law and company law at the Swedish Ministry of Justice. And Sofia, we already know. Welcome.
Thank you. There would be differences between Central Europe and the Nordic countries. We must find the whole legal tradition completely different in a country like Sweden or Norway and Germany and Great Britain. I mean, we need to face this, and now when we are trying to talk about the regulation or directives, regulations that we are trying to put in place together between the three institutions, when the Commission is presenting a proposal, this is not the end of the day. It's not the final result. It's a proposal and must be considered a proposal, and the co-legislators, namely us, the European Parliament, and the Member States, are obliged to find and define a common position and to take that as a point of departure for negotiations.
So how will these directives and regulation affect the governance of Nordic corporate?
Take into consideration what I just mentioned, the different legal traditions. Now, in 2009, I was told that it was actually the first time ever that a member of the European Parliament from Sweden or Finland or Denmark, I think also, was elected coordinator.
We need to be very concrete, I think, in terms of pointing out what parts of proposals from the Commissions are we not pleased with and why are we not pleased with them, and to also be very diligent when making priorities.
Adopting those rules in Nordic countries would increase the competitiveness of the Nordic. Competitiveness that Nordic countries would be more attractive for investment, more attractive for locating businesses in these countries.
I think it's important to remember that today's excellence will be the standard of tomorrow.
We don't see any contradiction. We think it will be very, very good for Sweden.
The question is what kind of a regulation you have in place. You can regulate the same thing in very many various ways. And one thing I would put a lot of focus is on this integrated reporting.
Agree more. What we need to always take into consideration is what is the European added value on this piece of legislation that is now proposed.
I think we can be of great support to the Nordic representatives in the Parliament and also a strong lobbying force on a Nordic basis. But we need to be there. We can't just sit up here in Sweden, Finland and Denmark and hope for the best. Finally, I would like to thank the steering group and the project group for organizing this conference. You've done a great job. Thank you all, and have a nice summer. Thank you.